In this video we'll show you how to dominate the field with one of the most dynamic and versatile soccer formations, the 3-4-3. The 3-4-3 formation has become a favourite for coaches looking to balance attack and defence, and in today's video we'll break down how it works, its strengths, its weaknesses and tips to execute it to perfection. So what is the 3-4-3 formation? Let's take a look at how it's set up. The 3-4-3 is set up with 3 defenders, 4 midfielders and 3 attackers who can be split between wide forwards or 2 10s that sit behind the 9. This formation is unlike traditional formation, so let's take a look at the roles and responsibilities for each position. So what we're showing here is that we've got our starting positions for our 3-4-3, so the 3 centre-backs, 4 midfielders including wing-backs, 2 attacking midfielders and a striker. So as you can see with the 4 vertical lines, 4 lines of defence, attack, you can see that we've got lots of passing options and triangles to play through the thirds. So we've looked at the shape, let's take a look at what our movements look like in possession. So when we get the ball, what do we do and where do we sit? So when we've got the ball, we want our centre-backs to split and get wide. We want our wing-backs to advance. We want our 2 advanced midfielders, so 2 of the 3 to tuck in to make a box midfield. And then our striker stays as the pinpoint of the attack as well. So we turn into a 3-2 in build-up stage. That gives us 4 more players behind the striker because the wing-backs play nice and high. So it becomes a really, really robust attacking formation all of a sudden. Okay, let's take a closer look at the centre-backs in possession. Okay, so let's take a look at the back 3 as a support function when we've got the ball. So when we're in possession of the ball, we want our wide centre-halves to split like they are doing now to cover the full width of the pitch. This enables us to support the attacking players, just as we would do with the back 4, full coverage of the back line, and at any time when the ball's recycled back into the defensive line, we can switch it out to the other side, like you're seeing here. What we could also do, if we are being pressed heavily, is we could play through the midfield, because that 3-2 formation now in possession is a really strong formation to build up play in. So what our centre-backs getting wide allows is for our wing-backs to push up high. So our centre-backs, our wide centre-backs are occupying that space. So we're not getting caught as a 5 at the back, which can happen and we can get too deep. We don't want our wing-backs coming back and receiving the ball in these areas. We want our centre-backs to take care of that. That enables our wing-backs to push much higher up the pitch and we can become much more aggressive. As always, though, what you need to think about is the profile of player that you've got. The types of player you're going to need for the centre-backs is people that are composed and good on the ball, as well as good in 1v1 situations should we get exposed if we lose the ball. Now let's take a look at what the responsibilities of the wing-backs are. So once our centre-halves move wide, that allows our wing-backs to push forward and occupy a higher area. Now this does a few things. One, it occupies the back 4. And occupies the entirety of the back 4 because I've got much more players there to think about. And it gives our build-up players, so our 3 and our 2 in our build-up phase, more space and more time to build out. Now we'll take a look at what that looks like in terms of when we've got opposition layered in as well. But if you've got your wing-backs in a high position, that gives the opposition much more problems to think about and to deal with and allows us a bit more comfort to play out from the back. Okay, let's take a look at the box midfield. So once the centre-backs have moved wide and the wing-backs have pushed forwards, your 2 attacking midfielders move inside to create the box midfield. So the box midfield is built around 4 midfielders, 2 holding and 2 attacking, forming a shape like a rectangle or a box. The holding midfielders shield the back line, providing defensive stability and ball retention. They're the anchors, ensuring the team keeps its shape. And the attacking midfielders operate higher up the field. They link the play with the forwards and exploit any gaps in between the opposition's lines. The beauty of the box is its flexibility. You compress defensively to crowd central spaces, or you expand in attack and you can overload both in central areas and in the wide areas in attack as well. The box midfield blends control and creativity, making it a favourite in modern tactics. If you master it, you'll dominate the heart of the game, and the 3-4-3 formation allows us to execute the box midfield perfectly. Ultimately, we're trying to find the spare man and play forwards. Okay, let's take a look out of possession now. So our vulnerable areas in a back 3 with wing-backs is always in behind those wing-backs if they're too high. So the first option of how we deal with this and how we mitigate this is as follows. So we're going to look at our shape and how we set up. And the first option is that the wing-back ball side presses the ball, the back three shift across, and the opposite wing-back tucks across to really give us that structure and shape. The wing-back that's pressing ball side is trying to, one, stop the forward pass and push the opposition to play backwards. They'll probably look to switch play, but we're trying to push the opposition backwards. So again, our vulnerable areas are in behind the wing-backs, in the wide areas next to the wide centre halves. We're saying that the wing-back that is ball side presses the ball. Our back three shuffle across to fill that space, and our opposite wing-back tucks across to keep that central structure of the back three. Let's take a look at another way we might press the ball out of possession. So again, just to reiterate, our weak areas are in behind the wing-backs. If they're caught high up the pitch, which can happen in transition moments if you lose the ball, your weaker areas are in behind the wing-backs at the sides of the centre-backs. And if our wing-backs don't press the ball, who else might we want to press? So we're going to ask one of our 10s to press the ball. The wing-back drops in the space, and the opposite 10 and opposite wing-back tuck in to make the midfield more compact. Again, that ball side 10, who's part of the front three, they're trying to stop the forward pass, force the opposition to play inside or backwards. That will probably result in a switch of play where we just have to reverse the roles on the opposite side of the pitch. So just to run through that again, so our danger areas are in behind the wing-backs, in the wide areas next to the centre-backs. We're asking our ball side 10 to press the ball and stop the forward pass. Our opposite 10 is going to tuck into the midfield to make a midfield 3, and our ball side wing-back is going to drop back and be part of that defensive line and sit in that gap that was a vulnerable area. Okay, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. The 3-4-3 formation offers a dynamic blend of defensive solidarity and attacking fluidity, making it a powerful tool when used effectively. Whether you're looking to dominate possession, exploit width, or press high, this setup can be a game changer. If you found this breakdown helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tactical insights. Please drop a comment below with your thoughts or questions, and let's keep the conversation going. See you in the next one. Thank you. The 4-2-3-1 is one of modern football's most flexible systems. With 2 holding midfielders and a fluid front 4 in attack, it balances defensive security with attacking creativity, and today we'll break down how it works. Okay, so the structure of a 4-2-3-1, we start with a back 4, so left back, 2 centre backs and a right back, which you can see in formation here. These full backs are going to be expected to get up the pitch and drive forward and support play. In front of them, we've got 2 defensive midfielders, often called a double pivot, highlighted here, who will look to support play and protect balls into the striker in front of the centre-backs and block passing lanes in that area as well. And also, if a fullback does get too high, one of these fullbacks can get in and cover if they can't recover quick enough. In front of the double pivots, we have 3 attacking midfielders, who are shown on the right-hand side here. We have a right winger, a central 10 who's expected to create and support the striker, and a left winger as well. And then that leaves a striker in isolation by themselves at the top of your picture here. But they shouldn't be too isolated if this midfield 3 do their jobs correctly and get forward and support. We'd really like those 3 attacking midfielders to be close to the striker, with the fullbacks push high, leaving the holding midfielders and the centre-backs and maybe one of the fullbacks who isn't on the ball side to really support the play. So now we're going to take a look at the pivot midfielders within a 4-2-3-1, who are the heartbeat of this formation. So I'm just going to pause it around here, and I'm just going to add in where our pivot midfielders are at the moment. The 2 pivot midfielders give the team defensive security. They screen the space in front of the centre-backs, which I'm just going to mark here. So you can see they're effectively screening that space in front of the centre-backs, cutting out the passing lanes and stopping the central counter-attacks. So you can see here, as the play develops, they're forced to go wide. They can't progress again because they've got really good shape, and they have to reset and come back out the other side. Okay, so we just recreated that scene in Sports Session Planner, so we can just take a little bit more of a tactical approach to it and just see it through this lens. I'm just going to insert the still here. Our pivot midfielder's in red and there's space in yellow. So let's take a look then. So now that we've got the image, the picture of the image in front of us, You can see the double pivot here in centre, and we talked about before their job of screening that ball into these front players. That player wants to play the ball into a central area so they can counter-attack in the most dangerous area through the centre of the pitch. What this double pivot screen does is protect this area, which is really important to us here. Okay, so really important that we protect that area and we stop the ball coming into there, and that double pivot are doing that really effectively. What you might see as well, and what you might have noticed in the clip, is that actually out of possession this shape might turn into a 4-4-1-1 or a 4-4-2, and we can see that now. Look, if we zoom out, we've got two banks of four, really compact, maybe a little bit of a gap between the right centre half and the right full back. Milan are doing a really good job of getting wide and making the pitch really big. And then we've got a secondary midfield line, so two banks of four. Again, that gap's there in between the two pivot midfielders and the wide midfielder. So this is potentially an area that Milan could have exploited here, but the front two are doing a really good job of forcing this attacking player out this way. So that isn't really an option because this player on the ball is being forced wide, not centrally. They haven't got an option to play forward and they're being forced wide, which is what you'll see happen in the clip, which I'll just show here. So you'll see there in the clip that we just watched that they go wide and then they have to recycle and come back out again. What I want to just show now is, because it's a 4-4-1-1 out of possession or a 4-4-2 out of possession, is when they do win the ball, what you're probably going to see, or what you should see, is it just return into a 4-2-3-1. So these players will come wide, the double pivot will widen up. So it becomes more familiar 4-2-3-1. As you can see, we've got the two pivots, the line of three behind the striker as well. So you've got that front four, the two supporting players, and what happens is these two pivot players will just look to support play and then rotate the ball out. So they're never, in the build-up stage, they might come and support and make a 4-1-4 there, but traditionally they'll look to support and rotate the ball out just as a support mechanism as well. Here I'm going to show you how to play out from the back without giving the ball away. So how we set up is really important. You can see the two centre backs have split and both of our full backs have pushed high. That gives the goalkeeper two options now. He can go out to either centre back or he can dink a ball to either full back in space. The two holding midfielders coming off are on the edge of the box to create a 5v3 overload. The striker and the three attacking midfielders push high to give space in the middle of the park to play. So as we move this on, we can see that the goalkeeper chooses the left centre back to play. Now I'm just going to pause it there and you can see that they've played left, and this is where the overload really comes into play. They've drawn three of the blue players left, and now you can see that the goalkeeper is a spare player and has options centrally and right. So take a look at the image and ask yourself now, where do you think the ball goes next? What's the best option? The goalkeeper chooses to play into the central holding midfielder, but just watch their movement now as they play right. Again, they've created an overload in the wide area, and the space is now in the half space for the holding midfielder to pick the ball up. And as you can see, the holding midfielder on the blind side of the striker picks up the ball in that half space. And the first thing I want to touch on is, if we've got a 10 in behind the striker, how do we find them space? Now obviously we've got two wingers, and if you think width and depth on a football pitch, those two things that create space for us when we're in possession, if we have our wingers high and wide, because wide stretches the opposition and high stretches the opposition in the opposite way as well, vertically, now all of a sudden the 10 has got a lot more space. So there's two movement patterns that I want to talk through here. If we are to stretch the opposition defence back, and we are to stretch the opposition defence from a width perspective, that gives our 10 a lot more space in the hole to pick up the ball and receive and be creative and hopefully get turned. So they're probably going to be a player that's going to come and receive the ball with their back to goal. Can we allow them to get turned and play forwards? So width, depth, really important from the front four. The second bit that's really important for movement is our interchange and fluidity of position as well. So if we have our front four here, if the striker has made a run into the channel there's a gap here that needs filling. So the 9 position needs filling. So either the 10 would get forward and hit that gap, or even we've got wingers that are coming inside or coming into that space there to really make sure that we're filling that gap, or we're taking advantage of the space that's been offered to us. The 10 is really important in our movement as a front four. So they're going to operate in the half spaces quite a bit. So if they do come and operate in the half space here, what that gives us is an overload in possession. So also we've got 3 players that have overloaded the half space. Objective being, can we get the ball around a defensive 2 to then get in behind, maybe get this player into the half space here. So half space usage of the 10, again, really important. That striker might come and support on this side as well. And we've got triangles in different areas of the pitch. And you're probably going to defend in a 4-4-1-1, something like this, or a flat 4-4-2, something like that. So something really compact, something really easy. And how the front 2 press is really important. So we've got the ball with a back 4 and a pivot midfielder, and that's what we're going to concentrate on for the press. If this sided centre-back has got the ball here, striker presses, the 10 will come onto the pivot. If that ball goes into the opposite centre-half, the 10 goes to press, and the striker comes to cover that defensive midfielder. We're always looking to cover that defensive midfielder. If the ball goes out to the fullback, we're doing what's called a shadow press, where we want to make sure that player that's just played the ball is in our shadow. So we're curving our run to be in line with the passing lane, and then we're pressing here, and we're still covering the 10. Okay, so that's really important, that pivot. So again, just to make sure that we are locked on, if the striker has gone to press there, we have to make sure the 10 has got the opposition's defensive midfielder. If that ball goes out wide, again, that shadow press comes in. We're curving our run to be in line with that passing lane, and then we've covered the defensive midfielder. So the only options they've got is to either go long or to play into a busy area. Obviously, our team will have pulled across into our defensive shape, something a bit like this. That's the 4-2-3-1, balanced, flexible and built for control in both attack and defence. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like, subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one. Today we're going to take a look at the 3-5-2, its strengths, its weaknesses, and ultimately is the 3-5-2 for you. Okay, so the basics of a 3-5-2 formation, we've obviously got 3 centre halves, 3 centre backs. We'll start there. Missing a goalkeeper, we need a goalkeeper. 3 midfielders, as shown, 2 wing backs, 1 right, 1 left, and then 2 strikers who will drive the attack. The one variance might be that you could play about with this midfield. You might not have a single pivot midfielder. You might have a 10 in between the strikers, and then have 2 holding pivot midfielders in behind. But that is the 3-5. So you've got your wing backs, 2 midfielders, the 10 as the 5, and then the 2 strikers. 3-5-2. Okay, so strengths of a 3-5-2. First one, I think, is that you've got a 3 centre halves. That's really solid, and that ensures that the back line stays compact. That does offer problems, but if we're looking at strengths right now, you can say really compact as a defensive unit, really tough to break down if we've got the right players in these wing-back areas, and more importantly, these centre halves know their roles to a T as well. Midfield control, you've obviously got 3 in the midfield, so you've got the benefit of 3 centre halves, 3 midfielders and 2 strikers. So you've got a really strong spine here, really strong spine through the team. You can control midfield in these areas. You've got lots of counter-attacking potential. So yes, you might get stuck in these areas at times, probably going to sit in a lower block. When the ball does transition, you can come straight into these strikers who hopefully should be able to hold the ball, and we can get players forward and we can counter-attack at pace. And then we've got the flexibility of the wing-backs as well. So yes, as we've just said, that can become really solid as a back five. But also, and this is why profile of these players is so important, you want them to be getting up here as well and really supporting the attack and being support for the two strikers that you've got up there. So key roles in a 3-5-2, wing-backs. If you have not got the right profile of player in these wing-back areas, then you're going to really, really struggle, and teams are going to get in behind you in these areas here. If you've got players that when, say we get caught with the ball here, we can't press immediately, and they haven't come back into their shape, then you're going to get caught in areas like this, okay? That is just going to happen time and time again. You really, really need the right profile player in these wing-back areas. And that might be, well it is, obvious ones are like high cardio levels, really, really fit. You want them to be technically good, but they have to get up and they have to get down as well. Communication has to be really, really strong in these areas. But just that willingness to get up and down is so, so important. Because otherwise you're going to find yourself like this most of the game. And you're going to be stuck in, you're going to get the ball back, maybe you've got the ball here, we're going to be really, really deep, we're going to be something like this. This happens a lot in a 3-5-2, and then these players try and get out, we play sideways passes here maybe, and that's just such an easy press to come and get there. And the opposition have made you come into this sort of area, so you're playing in half the pitch because you're camped in a back five, really struggle to get out. Because these players aren't the right players, because as soon as you win the ball back here, they need to try and get as high as possible to offer forward passes and just get us up the pitch as soon as possible. Central midfielders are really, really important as well. They're going to have to work hard and they're going to have to recognise danger as well. So if these players do get caught and players get into these areas, ideally you'd want that to happen, the back three come across, but there's an organisation here to happen as does someone fit into that area, the pivot normally. If these three can't get across, does that happen and they come and press the ball? That communication here is so, so important, because otherwise someone's going to get dragged out, a gap's going to appear, and one of the opposition are going to get in there and it's going to be a goal scoring opportunity. So you have to be really clear in our communication in the midfield area. They have to work forwards, they have to work backwards, they have to be ball winners, a mix of box-to-box ball winners, and you do want a little bit of someone that can do a bit with the ball in there as well, because you might get stuck in these areas, as we say, and then your only ball is into these front two strikers. So if you've got a player that can hold the ball, be patient, be brave on the ball to allow these players to get higher up the pitch, that's really important as well. And then finally, the strikers, you are sacrificing, like if you want to, whatever formation you play, if you want to overload one area, you're going to sacrifice space in another. Okay, so we are saying we want two strikers in this game, so we're sacrificing space here. Okay, so if we are going to sacrifice space, these need to do their job and they need to do it well. So ideally you want someone that can hold the ball. That's really, really important. So if we do get camped into these areas, I keep saying that, but that's going to happen. If we do get stuck here and we win the ball back, if we can come straight into there and they can hold, they can wrestle a player, maybe they've got a player on their back but they're comfortable with a player on their back, can they pop there and then we're out, and maybe this is a run in behind and we can play out. Well, that ball cannot just be going there and then the opposition are just picking it up, because they've both run that way. Someone needs to be comfortable coming and getting the ball in front of those centre halves. And so ideally, like old school, it sounds like old school, but someone that can hold on to the ball, one that goes in behind, would be perfect. So what are the tactical advantages of the 3-5-2? First one's overloads in midfield, right? So we have got strong overloads in the central areas. And they talk about 4-4-2 being really strong because you've got strength down the spine, you've got two strikers, two in midfield, you've got two centre halves. Well, 3-5-2 is even stronger than that because you've got three centre halves, You've got 3 in midfield and you've got 2 strikers. So that is really tough to play through, really tough spine. Where that does allow space is at full-back areas. They're probably going to have a lot of the ball in these areas. If the opposition switches out and switches out again, you've got decisions to make in that you either press or you drop. So full-backs are going to have space. And then there's space in these areas as well. So a good side will recognise that we're going to have the ball here and we can get in behind here. And that's where we're going to hurt you, because that's so strong, okay? So overloads in midfield is really important and a tactical advantage at the 3-5-2. You might be 3-on-3 in there, but you can have one of your strikers that come and does that and makes an overload there. So you've got potentially a box if you want to do that, or it could be a bit of a diamond with that 10 striker just coming in there and making the spare man. So you should always have a little bit of an overload in that midfield area. Defensive transition. So look, ultimately, when you haven't got the ball, you're going to be something like that, whether you like it or not, unless you're really, really structured. And if the ball has come into this area, this wing back has got in front of the ball, these 3 can come across, your midfield's going to tuck across something like this. And maybe you're just comfortable with this wing back just coming into that area there, perfect. But you will find yourself in times where you are camped a little bit in a low block and you've got 5 at the back. We're going to talk about that as an advantage for now, because that's really tough to break down. It's really tough to get out for you as a team, but it's really tough to break down as an advantage. So you should have overloads in defence. And then you've got flexibility in shape as well. I've just shown you one example there, but there's lots of different ways that you can manipulate this formation to suit your needs. So just to be really clear on the weaknesses that we think a 3-5-2 has, we've talked about it a great deal already, but it is just these wide areas, okay? So if we're not good with the ball and we turn over the ball a lot in a 3-5-2, we are potentially going to be caught in no man's land in the wing back areas. Teams, if they steal the ball in midfield, there's going to be huge gaps to exploit in transition. I mean, especially so if you've chosen to go 2 pivot, 1 attacking midfield here, that's going to offer a bit of vulnerability. But let's just say traditional style. If we steal the ball here, that player's got a runner off them, then probably not doing their work. Then you can get into these areas really easily. That drags the player out. You see the drag. If they don't respond quickly enough or they don't fill that gap, there's an area for the striker to peel off into here, and all of a sudden we've got a shot on goal. That can happen time and time again in a 3-5-2. If you're not clever with the ball. What you also have to accept is that you're probably going to concede, and I've just spoken about this already, but because you've got 2 in a central area, because you've got 3 in a central area, and if your wing backs are a little bit deep, then the full backs are going to have lots of time as an opposition. Maybe you allow that. Maybe that's something you say, actually, that's not our pressing trigger. And when the ball is played from there, then we go and press. Or fullbacks have got the space. We want our wing back to press, and we're just asking our centre halves to come across, and we're just going to squeeze the pitch. That wing back's going to come across, and we do the same when it goes across the other side. But the weaknesses, undoubtedly, in a 3-5-2 are are the wide areas, both at fullback, in for possession, for ball retention, and then in the opposition winger areas to hurt you. And then the secondary phase of that is that you get dragged out, and then there's gaps that appear between the centre halves. So these spaces are really, really important. The centre halves, you've heard the analogy, like you're on a piece of rope tied together. They need to be thinking in that way. Like they cannot get split, because that is so dangerous. They need to be a good amount of yards, really comfortable amount of yards away from each other, and they move as a constant block. And then just one thing to end on. So we finished with weaknesses, we talked about strengths, we talked about structure. What the 3-5-2 does give you, if these centre halves are good with the ball, and let's hope that they are, or comfortable at least, then when you are in possession, these wide players want to be coming out wide like that. Not necessarily wide, but into the half spaces here. And you can really control a game of football with a back three. Really control a game of football. Because that's going to be really hard to press for the opposition. And if we do have bravery here, that allows the wing-backs to get higher up the pitch. And it gives you more coverage in these areas to go and play. And you'll find that normally oppositions play, there'll be a winger that presses here, there'll be a striker, and then there'll be a wide player that's probably tucked in. So this player, no matter what side the ball's on, the opposite centre half should be available for switch and then be able to progress and drive. And when they do get the ball, drive, get the yards. If that happens, they tuck in, this one becomes available again. There's nothing wrong with turning out, pivoting and coming up that side, and then we're driving again for another 10, 15 yards just to get the space. And all the time that is happening, these wing-backs are getting higher and higher up the pitch. And that's really uncomfortable because you've got two marking there, you've got two marking here, you've got man for man on a back line. Really, really dangerous all of a sudden. So the ball retention here, very important. That allows an overload here. And it's not an overload in terms of 5v4, but you've got a man for man situation and that can quickly turn into an overload. If our touches are right and we retain the ball and we drag one player away or we beat a man, say we get the ball into here, they beat a man, all of a sudden now we've got an overload, we've got a 4v3. So that ball retention here starts everything in a 3-5-2. So is the 3-5-2 for you? Yes, if you have strong wing backs with stamina and can do that job where they get up and down, that's really, really important. Your centre backs can use the ball and have got good distribution, they're comfortable on the ball, they're happy to distribute, they feel comfortable distributing, and that ball's not going to get lost when they do. That's a really good firm pass, or good way to pass, and you're confident that these players can get us up the pitch. And you want a good balance between attack and defence, because if you have got the right profile of player, these players can come and defend in numbers, and then we can go and create an overload in attack as well. If you tick all those boxes, the 3-5-2 is for you, but it demands excellent fitness, communication, and tactical discipline as well. So if you tick all those boxes, give it a try and let me know what you think. Thank you. Stay tuned for an in-depth analysis of the 4-1-4-1 formation and find out exactly how this formation can work for you. So how is it set up? The 4-1-4-1 formation is set up with a back four, so a left back, two centre backs and a right back. You have a defensive midfielder who acts as the pivot and will screen in here and adds a defensive element to the midfield. 2 8s, so two central midfielders who will have to work up and down. A right midfielder and a left midfielder as a flat four, and then you've got a lone striker up front. Okay, so when is the 4-1-4-1 most effective? It's most effective if you're a coach or a manager that wants to play with a firm defensive structure. You have that because you have your midfield three, you have a flat back four, and you have a compact midfield. So this defensive midfielder can screen in front of the back two, it can drop in if the fullbacks get caught here, out wide as well, and can just give you a really, really firm defensive structure. You can also transition really, really quickly to attack. So all formations are only a few yards away from being a different formation. So very, very quickly, a 4-1-4-1 becomes a 4-3-3. And those wide men, if they can transition really quickly, and you can get these midfielders to work really hard, when the ball turns over and we win the ball back here, these eights can push up, these wingers can push up from their wide positions, and then all of a sudden you've got a very, very strong attacking structure in a 4-3-3 model where you'll look for the fullbacks to get forward, the wingers to stay high, and the midfield three to control possession. So what formations is the 4-1-4-1 most effective against? 4-4-2 definitely, because you will only have a flat two midfield in there, so you'll be able to dominate midfield. that gives you a huge advantage in midfield with the 4-1-4-1. And so if you are playing against a 4-4-2, rather than going up 4-4-2 against them, think about going a 4-1-4-1 with wanting these wide players to get forward and support your lone striker in a 4-3-3 in attack. So first advantage is against a 4-4-2, you will have the extra midfielder. There should always be a spare man if he gets pressed. If they're both being pressed, your defensive midfielder is a spare man. If he presses here, then the space is here. The 4-1-4-1 is also really, really effective against a back three, so in a 3-5-2. Now this is really dependent on what the 3-5-2's wingbacks are like, okay? So if the 3-5-2 that you're playing against has wingbacks that are struggling to get back, so they've pushed up the field and they're getting caught in these areas, your wide players can cause a 3-5-2 a lot of issues. Similarly with a 3-4-3, any formation with a back three, a 4-1-4-1 potentially should be able to cause them a lot of issues in these areas. So if you are playing against a 3-5-2 and you decide to go to a 4-1-4-1, you might lose a few battles here because the back three should be easily able to take care of the lone striker. But you want to be popping balls into these areas behind the wingbacks. So the wingbacks will push high. That leaves all of this space available. These centre defenders don't want to come into these areas. So if you do play the ball, pop the ball into there, we can get this player forward. That means he's got to come across there, or she. These players have got to shuffle across, which will leave an overload at the back stick for us to exploit. Okay, so a 3-5-2 is a really good formation to play against with a 4-1-4-1. When is the 4-1-4-1 least effective? Now, what can happen is that the lone striker presses, they're high up the pitch. If the back four haven't got out quickly enough, then the distance between these two players, the pivot midfielder and the striker, can be absolutely huge. If we get caught over in a turnover of possession in midfield, say the ball's been won back here, all of a sudden a team can counter-attack us at pace and we're in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of space in these areas that teams can hurt us with. So when we haven't got the ball in a 4-1-4-1, what we want to be really conscious of is the distance, just move these out of the way, is the distance between the pivot midfielder and our lone striker. That distance doesn't want to be too far. If anything, if this striker is running and pressing and it's hurting us, just ask them to screen, so that four just becomes two banks of four with a pivot screen and a forward screen as well, and we're just stopping that ball come in, and then the opposite side will just have to keep playing from one side to the other, and they'll probably just switch, and we can easily just adjust our shape again, screening the balls, one into midfield and two into the striker, and that's going to get really, really frustrating for the opposition. They're just going to keep playing the ball and playing the ball, and at any level of football, they should give you the ball back at some point with really, really good defensive shape. So what do we do in a 4-1-4-1 out of possession? Now I've just touched on it there. What you want to really concentrate on, wherever the ball is, so say the ball here is at the opposition right back, we want to really concentrate on having two banks of four, which are tucked across. So the two banks of four will tuck right across. The pivot midfielder is screening the passes into the opposition striker, so they will be tucked across, they will be tucked across. And he's or she is really trying to screen the balls, a direct ball through to there and stop that ball coming. Okay, their job is to patrol that area. The striker, you can either, depending on the opposition you're playing, how you want to play football, you can either ask them to really heavily press, but they're going to get tired really quickly in a lone roll, or you could ask them just to, again, shield that pass into the pivot midfielder of the opposition and screen. So you want two banks of four, really, really important, and then the two one's job, so the pivot and the striker, their job is to screen that ball centrally. So to stop the passing lanes being available centrally to come through us. So that forces the opposition to look, they can't come here, so then they've got to come out and wide. If they just hit a direct ball to there, you would hope that that ball would take long enough that we can shift and shift and shift. The two banks of four are going to shift and shift, shift and shift. The opposition will come with us in these areas. and the two pivots to the pivot striker and the pivot to midfielder will just shift that shape again, just to stop. When you hear about a low block or a mid block, this is a mid block here. The word block is really important. You are blocking the opposition progressing. You are stopping them playing forward. That is really, really important. So their only option is to come here, and then to turn and to come this way. And again, they're going to try and get here. That's the constant battle in football, is if you're out of possession, can you block them getting forward and shift and block them getting forward and shift and block them getting forward? Or if you have the ball, can you shift that ball quick enough to expose this side of the pitch to progress forwards? So really, really simple structure, an easy one for players to understand as well. So what is our shape in possession of the ball in a 4-1-4-1? As I said earlier, that the difference in formations is literally 10 yards sometimes, or 5 yards. Very, very quickly, it becomes a 4-3-3. Like the difference between a 4-1-4-1 and a 4-3-3 is not that different. It's just more how we set up out of possession. So in possession, I would suggest that you encourage your wingers to get forward and support this forward player. And you probably do morph into a 4-3-3 in possession. And you encourage your fullbacks to get nice and high. And really, like, you think about width and length of the football pitch, you want your striker to be nice and high, so you've got the length, and you want your fullbacks to be nice and wide, so you've got the width. So you're making the pitch really, really big, and it should make it easier to play within, because the opposition are going to try to be compact, like we looked at being compact out of possession. They're going to be compact, but this gives us a lot more space to play in. So if the opposition are compact and they're stopping us progress here, we can come out very quickly and progress on this side using the width that we have. So in possession with a 4-1-4-1, I would suggest the movements of fullbacks slightly higher, wingers higher and tucked in, and striker nice and high. That allows our midfielders to push high. The pivot midfielder does the same job, and we turn into a 4-3-3 essentially. Now, if we do lose the ball in a bad area, say here, both wingers are caught and the ball gets popped into an area there, the pivot's job is just to drop in, makes a back three, and it's really tough to progress then from that position. All we do at that point is just delay. We're just slowing the football down so players can get back in, the pivot midfielder can come back to their original spot, and the eights can come back in, the wingers can get back in, and the striker can get back in, and we've got some shape back. Good, so that is the 4-1-4-1 in possession. In-game adjustments, the only in-game adjustments I'd probably look at with a 4-1-4-1 is just that 4-3-3 model. Just change it, interchange. Don't be scared of having a formation in possession and out of possession, and be able to switch between the two. Players should be comfortable with those instructions. But look, thanks for viewing. That's a 4-1-4-1 analysis, bit of a deep dive. Let us know what you think in the comments, and please share, like and follow. Thank you. Okay, so the 4-4-2 often gets a bad rap nowadays. It's seen as a bit of a prehistoric formation, a bit of a dinosaur, mainly because of the midfield setup, because we're often against three opposition midfielders now. But I think there's loads of merit in the 4-4-2, and I think there's loads of ways that we can still use the 4-4-2 and get value from it, and maybe look to use it in transitionary ways as well. So you might well attack in one formation, but 4-4-2 feels really easy to defend in, so you might decide to defend in a 4-4-2 shape. But today's video, we're going to take you through an exhaustive bit of information about the 4-4-2. We're going to look through lots of key points, how it's set up, how we hold possession in the 4-4-2, lots and lots of different bits. But let's get straight into it. So the 4-4-2 in terms of shape, and people are going to hate me because it's a 1-4-4-2, but I'm not going to talk about the goalkeeper today, so apologies any goalkeepers unions out there. The 4-4-2 obviously has two centre halves, two centre backs, and a really solid defensive structure because it's got a full back four, so left back and a right back as well. We've got a left wing, right wing, two centre midfielders is where the controversy or the criticism comes in, because we come up against lots of 4-3-3s now, and you'll get an overload in this sort of area. So two midfielders, normally one that's box to box and one that's a deeper lying number 6, maybe so a 6 and an 8, and then 2 strikers, a 9 and a 10, one that would probably look to run in behind, and a target forward probably that's going to come and get the ball. But always with formations, you are literally meters on a tactics board away from being something else. So quite quickly, we turn into a 4-2-3-1. If I just move a couple of people a couple of yards, and you can see in transition actually, if we've got the ball, do we work in a 4-2-3-1? Because actually there's more passing options, and midfield is a bit more stable, more creative, and it's a bit more advanced. And then when we lose the ball, do we drop back into a very simple 4-4-2? That could be one option. I'm just saying how easy it is to manipulate formations, and we shouldn't think of them as such rigid structures because they can be changed very much so in transition. So that's the dead easy setup. 2 banks of 4. Where it might differ in a 4-4-2 shape is that you might have, rather than a flat 4, which is a traditional sense, you might have a diamond shape, which does negate the midfield 3 opposition because you've got an overload in there now. You've got 4 players, but you're gonna give up area in these wider areas. So the opposition fullbacks are going to have lots of space in these 2 areas here. So what you might have to do there is think about our front 2 are going to have to put some early pressure onto the opposition fullbacks in these areas, because that's going to have to give time for the central midfielders to get across and shift and get across into that area. So early pressure on the fullback from the front 2 is really important, and you have got more players to press that back line. But if you are playing a diamond, you will certainly notice that your weaker area is in these 2 areas here, in the opposition fullback areas. And every formation has weaker areas. Every formation that you stack up against a different formation will have its pros and cons. There's no perfect solution in any formation. That's why I really, really talk about having balance in players. So I would definitely recommend picking a formation that suits the players you've got and the type of profile of player that you've got, rather than trying to force a formation on players that can't necessarily execute the job roles within that formation. So next bit we're going to talk about is possession in a 4-4-2. So one obvious benefit is that you have a back 4 where you can safely recycle possession through. So we can switch play relatively easily through a back 4. If we came to here, it'd probably be a little bit deeper. This player's going to take up a wider position, so the right back can push on and be a bit more advanced, and that makes the right winger maybe tuck in slightly, but certainly gets them further up the pitch, and then we can recycle out here. So one benefit straight away is that we've got a back 4 and that we can recycle possession out of the back 4 to the other side, because in most instances the opposition are going to be playing with I'll just put this play. The opposition are going to be playing with one up front, because most people play with a 4-3-3 now. So the 2 centre backs should be able to, one, be available for the ball. We're going to have to demand that they're brave enough to get on the ball, because they are our exit ball to come out, and these players might come a little bit deeper, because that's where the space is. And centre halves usually don't utilise all of the space that they've got most of the time. You will see centre halves come right up here to get the ball from their players, when if they dropped a little bit deeper, then that ball, and you can see the gap opening up with the opposition striker already. Obviously we're going to have wingers in here that adds a bit more chaos to the situation, but already we can see the amount of space that we've got, and centre backs in a back 4 should be really, really confident to drop back, because they've got the most space on the pitch. When we're in the opposition's half, they can exploit that space in behind them. That's benefit 1 of a 4-4-2, and that's how we would look to maintain possession. The weakness is obvious, is that we have a midfield 2 in here. So if I layer in an opposition midfield 3, they're going to be something like that. So obviously they've got an overload. So if they were to pick their players, go and press their players here, then we have an overloaded player here who can get out and get turned in a really dangerous area in between the lines. So that's a real problem. Okay, and the reverse of that is when we've got the ball and we're trying to play. So that ball's coming to there from the left back. There's an easy press on it because although we all have overloads in other parts of the pitch, we're cramped in the midfield area. So they're probably going to have to lend that ball back, play a wall pass. So again, we've got to be brave on the ball, attract that pressure in, play the wall pass. And if that player has brought this player in here, then the ball straight into the 10 there might be on. So wall pass into the midfield, back out to the left back, who can then play forward either to their winger or straight into the 10, straight into the forward. One of the forward players at least, and we get on the pitch. And the theme of a 4-4-2 very much is play forward, especially in the midfield area. If you can get turned, play forward as quickly as possible, because the advantage lies in our front four, because we want our wingers nice and high. We want them to be able to get an opposition back four, because what that does to the opposition, you'll see there, if I put a back four in, layer a back four in, you've pinned them back, which will offer space again. So that's a 4v4, and you'll find yourselves in these situations quite a bit, where now the opposition midfielders need to think about coming in and helping in that area, because they don't want to leave a 4v4 situation because one player gets beat. Say this player here beats their man, gets past them, like a skillful winger can do. Now we're in an overload situation because this player has got to react and come here, and this player's got to come across. And now all of a sudden, if there's a gap anywhere in that back line there, we're exploiting space. That ball can come straight into here, and we've got a shot at goal. So play forward, play into your forward 4 players, your wingers and your 2 strikers, not in a risky way, but as quickly as possible and as safe as possible to retain the ball, but get them in 1v1 situations in a 4-4-2. That's what we want to do. So just clear this board up slightly. So another principle in a 4-4-2 is that we really want to get wide and stretch the play. So when we've got the ball, I mean, it's the old adage, when you're defending, squeeze, contract. When you've got the ball, get really big, and that's no more prevalent than it is in a 4-4-2, because there will be gaps in between the lines. It's quite a rigid structure. So if an opposition switches the ball quickly and they are committed to switch the ball and keep doing that, then there will be gaps that appear in a 4-4-2. So when we have got the ball, it's important that our fullbacks and our wingers are wide, because what that does is it really makes the opposition think about our wide players, and that's going to draw them across, because if the ball's on this side, they're going to look right across here. These players are going to tuck across. I know I haven't got all. Let's say we're playing a 4-3-3. Let's get another one in. The winger will probably tuck in here. This winger's probably pressing there. And then we've got 2 wingers and a striker. Yeah, we've got the full team in there. So as you can see, they will get attracted across. An easy switch. We talk about that recycle of possession. That player will probably come in there in the modern game. If this player is brave enough to drop, use that spacing behind them, we can recycle the possession. So we're coming out, or even straight to there if we're brave enough. But let's just say we're coming there. And then again, that might go straight there or there if we're a bit more risk adverse. But you can see we are rotating that ball because we've kept our width. And then we've got our left winger in what should be, if we've got them that high up the pitch, a 1v1 situation, because these players are going to have to come back across, tuck back across the pitch, and as this team will move as well. And then we're in what hopefully would be a 4v4 or a 5v4, 4v5, worst case. Then we'd be asking one of our 8s to join up and get in the play. So what a 4-4-2 does give you in the final third, hopefully, is at least a man-v-man situation. So if you do have skillful players who can beat someone 1v1, that creates an overload, because the next defender, if they're covering, are going to have to come and press, and then there will be gaps that appear throughout this line. So in attack, if we can play forwards and we can recycle possession, then we should have some joy in a 4-4-2. Let me just start again and take some of these players out. So it's a little bit cleaner on the tactics board. But I love 4-4-2, always have done. But again, the profile of player, especially in that midfield area, is really, really important. Just bring our shape back. There we go. Very loose 4-4-2. But you can see when I talk about the rigidity, if we do get caught, there's huge gaps that can appear between the lines. And clever opposition players are going to really exploit that. And I'm talking here as well, right? So any of these gaps that appear in between the lines there, that's just trouble in a 4-4-2. So we really, really need to make sure we're compact, and we're going to come on to that a little bit later. Good. Strikers in possession. So your strikers, obviously, with any formation we have, we're trying to create an overload in one area. But by creating an overload in one area, we create an underload in another. So, for example, the 2 striker formations that are most popular, 4-4-2, we're creating an overload in this area. Where we have an underload is in the midfield area. Okay, so that's our underloaded area. That's our overloaded area. Okay, so that's where we want the ball to be, is in where we have the benefit. A 3-5-2, the risks are with the back line, of course, because you have a back 3 and people can get down the sides. But that's for another video. But in a 4-4-2, our risky area is the midfield, strong area is the front 2. So the roles of the 2 strikers are really, really important. Traditional strikers or traditional 2 striker roles, you would perhaps have a 10 that's a target, and a 9 that would do the running in behind and stretch the opposition. And again, if we bring these players back slightly, when we talk about width and length, we talked about width already, but the importance of length is really important as well. So our vertical play and playing forwards, if I add back line into this again, so if I add a back 4 into this area, tidy those up. So if this is our shape here, we can't have 2 strikers that are both coming towards the ball. And this, again, sounds really, really obvious. But that striker making that run in behind makes these players drop a little bit deeper, a bit deeper, a bit deeper. And that offers us up space in the dangerous areas. And this 10 will probably come and drop it into this sort of area to the ball. I think Dennis Bergkamp, who did that really, really well with Thierry Henry, and when everyone used to play 4-4-2, they would drop into that sort of area, and then you're in more of a 4-4-1-1 with the ball, or you can see where a 4-2-3-1 comes from, because again, I'm not moving the players far there, and it just becomes a different formation completely. So the roles of the strikers are very important, and we talk about those deep runs and stretching the opposition vertically. Well, again, it's like the shape of the run. It's not just straight run and in to out run, and more commonly known as running the channels in these sort of areas. So a striker running there, get the ball in the channels. You hear that a lot. A striker running there to have the ball knocked into that area, maybe by a fullback there. Used to see Dwight York and Andy Cole used to do that brilliantly, and then that gives the winger the opportunity to get into that danger area there and make an out to in run, and that combination is absolutely lethal if we get it right. So the left back putting the ball in the channel, the strikers making a in to out run to get the ball, the wide winger, the left winger here is making their out to in run. And now they're the ones that's creating the danger. And that's obviously the defenders would react there, but that's in simplistic terms. the sort of things that we would like to see. And that obviously works with the reverse on the opposite side. The strikers made the run, we've played the ball down the side, and the winger has got into those sort of areas, and then we could perhaps have a cross into that area for a goal scoring opportunity. But that's the sort of movement that we need to see from our front players. So that's briefly striker roles and the movement we'd want to see from our strikers. Now, my favourite subject, defending as a unit. I used to be a defender, so I love talking about defending. It's not the most glamorous thing in the world. But in a 4-4-2, your compactness is extremely important because gaps will appear between the lines. So what we want to see is, depending on where the ball is. So the first thing we want to be is goal side, okay? So goal side, ball side are the two things that you want to be. So we are going to assume that the opposition, sorry, I'm just moving these across really, really slowly. We're going to assume that the opposition right back, right? The opposition right back has got the ball here. So we're all goal side of the ball, which means we're closer to our goal than the ball. So we're all goal side of the ball. And then we want to be ball side as well, which means we want to shift as a unit to the ball side. Okay, so they're going to come across as two banks of four. And again, that's a phrase that you hear a lot, two banks of four, but it's really, really solid. And it's really important that these wingers, when we are defending, tuck right across. And they want to be in line with the back post, ideally, or a little bit further if they're brave enough to tuck in, okay? And you'll see, just watch modern football now and see how brave teams are when they shift over in their block. It will blow your mind how far they get over the pitch. Because the obvious point is, but what about these players out here? What about the opposition winger here, okay? That's the fear that we've got to get over is, well, we're leaving somebody in 20, 30 yards of space. Trust me, that's okay. Because by the time they have played that ball to there, or even better, gone to there, and gone to there, this block should have shifted as a unit to get to there, okay? And then they've got to think about getting back here again, and back to here. And that the movement of the block is very, very important. Let me just get that arrow. Apologies if you can hear my washing machine. That's not very professional, but we move. So, and the block just moves and moves and moves with the ball. So as the opposition switch the play, the block moves vertically and horizontally, okay? And this will be down to your game model, your strategy, whether you want to do a high press, whether you want to have a mid block, or you want to have a lower block, which sits much deeper. That is completely down to your model and how you want to win the ball back. But the spacing between the lines is so important. Not just in between the vertical line, so between the winger and the midfielder, or the right back and the central defender, but between the back four and the midfield four. This gap here in a 4-4-2 is going to cause you problems if, and this is why communication is so important, if that's just that, and that gap is even bigger, opposition players will get a player in there and get them turned, and then you're in all sorts of problems, okay? And the same is relatively true. Clicked on someone. The same is true for these front players. If those gaps appear there, and then there is another gap in there, you have the exact same problem. Especially if you're playing against a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, they have a pivot player and they have a 10, okay? So those players are going to find a lot of joy if you haven't squeezed. And Jose Mourinho did a great clip on Sky Sports years ago where he talked about Rafa Benitez doing that to his players all the time, and he was saying squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And what he meant by that was squeezing into those gaps. So the back four really squeezed. and this is your preference, how you want these strikers to work, but you'll see a lot of strikers drop off now and just cut out pass lines. That arrow's doing my head in. Let me just get rid of that. Get rid of these. You'll see these strikers just drop into here, really compact block, but it's also across that side of the pitch as well. So compactness in defence is very, very, very important. So, and that takes work because the opposition will switch it. They will switch it. If I just take these players out, and I can show you how gaps can appear. But as we shift across, let's say they've done a fantastic job, but, and this is exaggerated, right? Some of these players will be a bit closer, but you can see now there is a huge gap now here. Come from, maybe this might be the third switch of play where they've just been really, really patient, and now they haven't even had to, so that maybe this player here, the centre half, I'll just add this centre half in here, whereas for the last couple of switches, he's been playing to here, maybe he masks that and fakes it, and now all of a sudden, there is a huge gap in here, and he plays forward or she plays forward straight into there, and now you're in trouble. So that's where gaps can appear as we switch play. Okay, so that's defending as a unit. Just tidy this board up again as we move on to the next topic. Four back together. 4-4-2. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Okay, good. So, wide and central midfield roles. So, the midfield area is really, really important. The relational play between the wide midfielders and their fullbacks is also really, really important. So, you imagine a wide midfielder in a 4-4-2. Players, they are defensively responsible for the wing back. Okay, they've got to tuck into the midfield when they haven't got the ball. So that fullback, sorry, I said wing back, I meant fullback. So they've got to tuck into there when they haven't got the ball, but they are responsible ultimately in their 1v1 battle for the fullback. So they have probably in some cases got to be tracking back well into their own final third with that fullback, if that's an adventurous fullback. But they are also expected to get forward and attack as well. So it's a highly dynamic role, and it's a highly demanding role fitness-wise. So they've got to be up and down and be really aware of centrally where they need to help out as well. Now, the relationship with their fullback is really important because in a 4-4-2, we would want our fullback to get forward. So we would expect, and this is where we talk about positional play or relational play. Relational play is understanding, like Gary Neville and David Beckham, they understood if one player's here, I understand where I need to be. So if our winger stays there and they receive the ball comes into there. This fullback relationally would understand that their movement needs to be an inside run there because that's going to attract somebody else across, and that would give the winger some space down the line to get forward. The same applies if this winger receives it inside here. Relationally, they know that their overlap run needs to be in as well. And they might not always get the ball, but the secondary benefit of that is attracting other players to it and to give us more space in different areas. So their relational bits are really, really important. The central midfielders' responsibilities, as I said at the start, we tend to have a 6 and an 8. So a 6 would be a deeper lay-in player, someone that's going to come and sit and look to build up play, control the tempo. And we would have traditional 8 as well, someone that's going to be box to box and can work up and down, support the front four, and then get back and defend as well, because they can't be behind, they can't walk back, they have to get back with their other midfielder to defend. So both these players I would recommend have to be a certain profile of player, and they have to be industrious to be able to work up and down. And again, I repeat the point, but profile of player in a formation is extremely important. If someone's not fit or agile, you won't play them as a wing back. If they're not creative and technical, you won't play them as a 10. If someone's not industrious and box to box and comfortable in possession and brave in possession, you're not going to play them in a 2 in midfield. So that's really, really important. The striker dynamics we've talked about. We've talked about how to be down as well. Other variables in a 4-4-2. Now, I've talked about transitionary moments in the past and during this video as well. I don't want us to think about formations as a rigid structure. It's absolutely fine to have different formations and different structures for different moments of the game. So, for example, we might decide actually that when we haven't got the ball, I really, really like 4-4-2 because it's really, really compact. And it's really simple for the players. They understand their roles. It's really clear, defined roles in structure. Everyone gets it. It's not overly complex. And that's how I want to defend out of possession. But I also might decide that when we have got the ball, that get our striker up here. I might also decide that when we have got the ball, my right back inverts to become a holding midfielder, and we build up with the back 3. That's also okay. You might also decide that a left back, that comes in there. You might have your 2 holding midfielders. The left winger might tuck in. The left back might tuck across, and that might give you traditional. Well, lots of teams are building up with a 3-2 now, like that, and give you that as your build-up structure. And that was a 4-4-2 a minute ago, and all that's happened is our left winger has tucked in field, and they don't have to go all the way across, but they just might tuck into a narrow channel. The left back has pushed up as a left winger, and now we've got 3-2 to build up in, and which is a really solid build-up structure. Lots of teams do a 2-3 now as well, depending on the formation that you're starting. If you was going from a 4-3-3, invert the fullback in. But yeah, don't be fixed. Be flexible in terms of your approach, and allow that fluidity. Because ultimately, you want more players at the top end of the pitch when you're attacking. You want more players at the bottom end of the pitch when you're defending. That's just to be really simple about it. So that's a 4-4-2. The ultimate question is, does it still work? I think it does still work. I really, really like the 4-4-2. I think we have to think about it differently in player roles. It's not as rigid as it used to be, but we do have to play forward, and we have to get our players in 1v1 situations, and we have to have the right profile of player. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please let us know. And if you've got any recommendations, any other videos that you'd like, please drop it in the comments. Thank you. So the 3-5-2 has got lots and lots of advantages. It's a really successful formation. If you get it right, it's going to be brilliant, but you have to have the right personnel to make it right. The things that make it most effective are, 1, midfield dominance. So you have a 3-man midfield here, and you can dominate in midfield. Most people play with a 3 midfield, or if they're playing a flat 2 midfield, you're going to have a lot of possession here. You've got flexibility in attack, so you've got 2 forwards, and you've got wingbacks that can get nice and high as well. So when you're in possession, your back 3 will split like this to support and play forwards. Your midfield 3 should have plenty of the ball here. And if we do maintain possession with the back 6 like this, which they should be able to just rotate around, that'll allow the wing backs to get nice and high, and you should be able to play with a front 4 really, and really dominate the ball. And this will pin the opposition fullbacks in as well. So if the opposition are playing a back 4, you can really pin their fullbacks in and have lots of the ball in these areas. And with these wing backs, you can create overloads as well, so you can isolate a fullback with a striker supporting midfield and really overload in these areas to get in behind. What you do have as well is defensive solidarity. So if you lose the ball, then quite quickly you transition back into back 3 will come nice and tight. Your wing backs should be able to do both jobs, and this is why profile of player is extremely important in this instance. And you want to make sure that you've got the right players who can get back into these positions, and then the strikers come back and what's press from the front really. That having a front two allows you to press from the front and win the ball back early, but it's really solid defensively. So now we're going to look at where is the 3-5-2 least effective, where does it suffer. Now if you do like we've just mentioned, able to push your wing backs nice and high, it does leave gaping holes here and here. Or if your back three have spread like this, which they should do to support the ball to be able to switch out nicely. If you do lose the ball in a silly area, say you've been caught here, all of a sudden there's huge gaps in between your back three, and then if they do need to close ranks, which they should do in that situation, it leaves overload situations out. You're going to get caught in these areas. Teams playing against a 3-5-2, normally, if you haven't got the right profile out here, and this is where you suffer, right? So depending on what level you're playing at, you might not have the fitness out here or the players that can get and do both jobs. A team will just normally clip balls into these areas and just turn the defence or turn your wing back and get into these areas. That draws a man out here. And if there's any sort of gap that appears between the centre backs, then players just get into those positions and you're just in all sorts of trouble. Or if the defence can get across here, it just leaves a huge overload at the back, and say this wing back hasn't got in here, then you've just got players that can get just at you in all sorts of situations. So you're really vulnerable in wide areas, and the back three have to stay nice and tight in here and just defend the 18-yard line and concede space in these areas and allow them to get back. Or you want the pivot midfielder to get in and make a back four so you can keep that solidarity. You need a lot of stamina in wide areas. We've touched on that already. So it's least effective if you haven't got players that have got the right profile. And when you do win the ball back, if you've been caught in these areas, again, if these players aren't fit enough and have managed to get back in, what you can find is that you get caught in a back five a lot. You're trying to build out, you're trying to play out, you've got a heavy press on, you've got a lot of players pressing you once you've won the ball back. And to play out in these areas, if these players aren't fit enough, you're very, very deep with a back five, and you do get caught in your own third a lot, and it's really, really hard to maintain the ball and get back up the pitch again. That's why you need a target man if you can hit them to get them out. But again, I would probably really recommend, if you haven't got the right profile in these wide areas, just not to play a 3-5-2, because you're just going to be a back five most of the game. Or if they're being lazy at top end, you're just going to be caught in these areas a lot with overloads. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at what we do in possession of the ball. So let's say the centre half has got the ball here. What do we do? Now you want the back three, rather than being narrow, as they would normally set up out of possession, you want them to come nice and wide and probably get in the half spaces out here. Now that gives you full exposure, full width of the pitch. And where you would normally do that in a back four, and you get the the full-backs nice and high, you are doing exactly the same thing with three players. So you're able to rotate out. These are your three support players. They're not getting past the ball. They're strictly in support in these areas. So if we do play into here, we can play out to there, and we can maintain control of the ball. What these players being wide does is it allows our wing backs to go and play nice and high. Now trust me, if you've ever played against a 3-5-2, a really effective 3-5-2, you know that wing backs being high with a front two is an absolute nightmare, and it causes you a lot of problems when you haven't got the ball, and you normally get stuck in your own half if you've got against a team that's really, really good at executing a 3-5-2. So your three players at the back are in support, your wing backs are nice and high, and you have a pivot player that's joining it up in possession as well. Your front two are occupying the two centre halves, your wing backs are occupying the full backs. So again, we spoke about this earlier, but you really, really lock in a team. You lock them into their own final third, and that allows you to play with this six players in possession of the ball. You've got dominance in midfield because you've got three in midfield. You've got a front two that are occupying the two central defenders, and they won't want to be man for man across this area. So they might need a player to drop in and come and help, or a wing. What tends to happen actually is that if you're playing against wingers, one of these players, if this is ball side here, they'll pull them across like this, and they'll ask this winger on the far side to come and tuck in there. So that gives you the spare man here and the spare man here. So this is where you want the ball to end up. So as always in football, it's a game of drawing the opposition in. So we've got the ball here. We want them to tuck across as they would do in good shape. Your wing back is nice and high, so he's occupying the other team's winger in most cases. They want an extra man over because they've got two centre-halves to deal with here. They don't want to be man for man, so they want a spare man. And so the opposition winger is going to have to come in and deal with that. That means that this player is going to be completely free. They need to be signposting, telling them. So the switch can come across, and this player as well should be in a little bit of space to get in, and that's where you're going to hurt teams. So let's take a look at what we do when we haven't got the ball in a 3-5-2. So let's assume the opposition are playing a back four. What we do want to do in a 3-5-2 is counter press if we can do. So if we've lost the ball, we want to get in and win that ball as quickly as possible. You have the luxury in a 3-5-2 that you've got two forwards that can press a back four. And once we've been in possession, as we know, our wing back should still be in a relatively high position. So with this front four, essentially, we should be able to counter press and try and win the ball back in a high position. Where we're going to be in trouble is if we lose the ball in our other 2/3 and our wing backs are high, and we're going to get caught in these wide areas or with the gaps between the centre halves. So this is what we were in possession. Immediately, the centre halves want to come and close. Defend the width of your 18-yard box. That's where goals are scored. We concede space where it doesn't matter and defend the space where it does matter. So we want to make sure they come nice and tight. This is the danger areas. So you've got two options. One, you've got the right profile of player out here and these come and get back. Ideal, if that's the case, and you trust them to get up and down and they work really, really hard. Inevitably, you are going to get caught where your wing backs are high. So you want to think about, can you get a player, a pivot player maybe, that's going to come and shore up that back four so you can really defend the full line. What I want you to get into the habit of thinking of is, like, a formation isn't a strict formation all the way through. Formations are only positions on a tactics board, essentially. There's the right things to do in the right moments. And the right thing to do when you're getting caught in these areas is for a player to drop in and make a back four. So you might be a 3-5-2 in possession, but you might be a 4-5-1 out of possession, and just really think about in certain moments and certain triggers what you do. So something I've done in the past is a trigger. If the ball comes into these areas, that's a trigger for a pivot player to drop into the back three and make a four. So that player can come there, press the ball, and that gives me nice defensive coverage across the lines. Now that does leave me as a flat two, and this player's got less work to do to get back in, as this player does. So you might be a 4-4-2 at that point. If the ball is then recycled back into midfield, you've got a disadvantage here. Now you either decide that a player drops in there and you make a 4-5-1 so you can compete in midfield, or you leave the two and your pivot player that's dropped into the back four comes back into midfield to compete and you tighten back up here. And it's only when that ball comes into there that you decide that you're a back four. That's quite tough in transition. It's easy for me to do on a tactics board, but when that ball's moving, that's really tough on this pivot player. So my preference would be that you become a 4-5-1 and that player comes and helps. Sorry, a 4-5-1, and that player comes and helps in that area and just sits on their pivot player, because otherwise their pivot player, if he's good on the ball, he's going to dominate in there and be able to switch out. But these are the risky areas. That's what you need to think of.